Okay, we'll get into this lethal force and self-defense. Here's my quote. Remember this. Jeff Burkhart says, never shoot anybody, ever. Okay? So, I want to, if you remember anything, it's that Jeff Burkhart said, don't shoot anybody. Nevertheless, I know that you're interested in the law of lethal force and self-defense. I'm going to do a brief survey. It's an extremely complicated topic. We'll give you the basics of it because I know you're interested. In general, you commit a crime, you go to jail. Well, there's some exceptions to culpability. The exceptions are, it's either justified or it's excused. You commit a crime, you do something that's wrong, you either had a good reason, like, my wife deserved it, officer. That's justified. Or it was excused. Not you, Andrea, hypothetical wife. Okay. The basic excuses, you're too young, you're too dumb, or you're too drunk. Those are your excuses. Now, too dumb is a little colloquial for, you're mentally ill or, have some kind of problem. Basically, your mental state isn't there. You don't have the correct mental power to really decide, is this a crime? Is this right or wrong? You don't know the difference between right or wrong. That's the moral prong. Or you don't know what you're doing. That's the volitional prong. Either one of those, that's all incorporated in too dumb. Okay. Too young, if you're under 18, the laws decided that, well, we shouldn't really punish you as bad, at least, if you're too young. And too drunk is a little bit of a hybrid on the too dumb part, is that you're intoxicated, and for that reason that your mind isn't really as criminally culpable as it otherwise would be. Okay, so these are the exceptions. Remember that when you commit a crime, do you go to jail? Okay, it's either justified or excused. That's excused. We're going to leave that topic. Let's go to justified now. This is when you're talking about using a gun. Are you allowed to? Are you justified? The general rule, a non-aggressor, meaning you didn't start the fight, is justified in using force if you reasonably believe that such force is necessary to protect himself from imminent use of unlawful force by the other person. There's so much in that sentence. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of pages of court cases unpacking all that. We can't go into that. But you didn't start the fight. It was really necessary to use the force. The threat was imminent. It's not like, hey, Jeff, I'm going to kick your ass next week. Well, that's not imminent. It's got to be right now, right? Reasonable belief, oh, Jeff, I have my ray gun here. I'm going to shoot you and vaporize you. Well, that's not, that's not real. Stuff like that. Here's another topic I'm sure you've heard of. Got to go over this. People ask me about this a lot. The castle doctrine. We got the strong version, the weak version, and the other one. The strong version of the castle doctrine. The castle doctrine is based on this English concept that a man's home is his castle. We're in your house. Special rules apply. One of the special rules when we're talking about lethal force is normally, if you're getting in a fight, before you use lethal force, you have a duty to retreat. You have a duty to do everything you can except kill the guy. If you got a chance to retreat or walk away, you got to do it. Okay? But the castle doctrine is saying that if you're in your house, maybe, you don't have to retreat. There's a lot of maybes in this. But that's what the castle doctrine is about. A non-aggressor, you're not required to retreat if you're in your dwelling before you use deadly force. Even if you could retreat, you could run out the back door. In the strong castle jurisdiction, you do not have to retreat. In the weak version, If you could run out the door, yeah, you better run out the door. You still have the duty to retreat, even if you're in your own house, in a weak castle doctrine state. Most states, about 30, are strong castle doctrine, and that was a traditional English law. But about 7 or 10 are more of a weak version. A lot of gray area there. Then there's this other one, the stand your ground. Stand your ground state, remember with the Zimmerman case in Florida, that was in the news a lot, stand your ground, seems like an awful thing. 17 states have it, arguably including Washington, although I don't really have a strong opinion on that. My opinion is never shoot anybody ever, okay? That's my opinion. But here's what a stand your ground is. The duty to retreat is also excused even if you're not in your house. If you're just in any place where you're lawfully there, okay? So the strongest castle doctrine states are wherever you are, as long as you're not trespassing or otherwise not supposed to be there, you don't have to retreat before you use the lethal force. That's the strongest stand your ground. The more medium stand your ground was, well, they extended it. Not just your house, but maybe also your car or your workplace don't have to retreat. That's what the stand your ground stuff is. Okay. Stand your ground in Washington. Here's a statute about justifiable homicide in Washington. You can look that up if you want. Again, at the bottom it says Jeff Burkhart says never shoot anyone ever. Okay, but in Washington, homicide, meaning killing another man, or woman, of course, is justifiable. Notice it doesn't say justified. It's justifiable. That means like maybe, okay? In the lawful defense of yourself or your husband, wife, kids, or of another person, when there's a reasonable ground to apprehend that some kind of felony or great personal injury, and there's imminent danger of that occurring. That's the basic self-defense law. Here's the stand your ground part. In the actual residence, or in a dwelling, or other place of abode in which he or she is. So, that doesn't seem to think that it only applies in your castle, in your residence. It kind of seems to apply it could be in another location also. But I'm not offering an opinion on that. You can look that up yourself if you want. But I think that it's fair to say that Washington at least has a weak stand your ground law. Okay. This is a concept that you need to keep in mind with lethal force. There's no calculator where you can plug it in and decide whether you're going to jail or not. You can't say, well, it's 9 o'clock, I used the .22, I met him before, he was threatening my girlfriend, he has shot me already. You can't just plug that in. It's a continuum with a lot of factors. Some of the factors are good for justified, some of the factors are not good for justified. If you're defending a person, it's more likely to be justified than if you're just defending property. If you're defending yourself, it's more likely to be justified than if you're defending somebody else. If you're in your own residence, that's a lot stronger case for justification than if you're just out in public somewhere. If the force that you used is proportionate, that's better than he gave me the finger and I blew his head off with a shotgun. That's different. Okay? Proportionate is better than not proportionate. If it's an imminent threat, that's better than, well, I'm going to punch you someday. That's not as good. If it's a lethal threat, you're more likely to be able to use a strong force, even lethal force, rather than it's just a minor harm. Can't necessarily shoot somebody if they just push you down the steps, or if it's one step, who knows. It's a continuum. A lot of factors go into it. The way it really works is, in each particular case, all of the circumstances. Was it at night? Was it myself? Was it in my house? Was it lethal force? Was it just a punch? Was it a long history? All kinds of stuff. You throw it all into a bucket, and then the community decides if it was justified or not. And what do I mean by the community? Well, and the first step is your prosecuting attorney. He decides, was that justified or not? And then ultimately it would go to a jury, and the jury would decide, did this guy deserve it or not? All right, next, gun control. I'll read you this quote. The laws that forbid the carrying of arms, from Thomas Jefferson, disarm only those who are not inclined or determined to commit the crimes. Such laws make things worse for the assaulted and better for the assailants. They serve to encourage homicides, not prevent them, because an unarmed man may be attacked with greater confidence than an armed man. And even back then, they had some common sense. You know, there's a lot of gray area with the gun control, of course. The question of does gun control work is unknown. You can't really do a controlled study to say, if we limit the barrel size or we limit the capacity of magazines, then it makes the public safer. I mean, nobody knows that. In my mind, no, it does boil down to just the basic thing. The only people that follow the gun control laws are the law-abiding people. If you're a criminal, you don't care what the gun control laws are anyway. That's what it seems like to me. But we're talking about the Constitution here, so let's stay back on track. Here's the gun control topics. This is what I'm going to talk about, just to introduce. The gun show loophole, what is that? The assault weapons ban, what is that? And the high capacity magazines. All these things are kind of hot topics in gun control you'll see in the news. Here's what they are. The gun show loophole. Federal law requires that if you're engaged in the business of selling firearms, pawn shop dealer, gun shop, whatever, every time you sell a firearm, you have to perform a background check through the I don't know, the federal, the FBI thing, the database. So if I'm going to go buy a gun at a gun shop, I got to give them my name, social security number, address, whatever. They're going to go and see, am I mentally ill? Am I a felon? Things like that. If you're selling a gun and you're in a business of selling firearms, you have to do the background check. However, if you only make occasional sales of guns and you're selling within your own state, you're not required to do the background check. So if I got some extra guns laying around, I want to list them on Craigslist, I can sell them to somebody. I don't have to go and do the background check. I don't want you to take that I'm saying that you can just sell your guns willy-nilly. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I don't have to do the background check. There are some other requirements, but a background check isn't one of them. Okay.